The Toyota Corolla. We've got another review of this car in today's episode on Chasing Cars, but not without good reason, because last year it was the fourth best-selling vehicle in Australia, behind names like the Toyota RAV4, which came in third, the Toyota Hilux, and also the Ford Ranger. Three super strong selling cars followed up by this Corolla. And yet, in the first quarter of 2022, the Corolla sales has dipped significantly. It's now sitting in 9th spot in the overall sales charts, behind its key rival, the Hyundai i30, another small car which we've done a comparison of several times on this channel. So if you want to see that, you can click onto those videos right after you've watched this one. But which Corolla have we got on test today? Importantly, I have the sportiest variant of Corolla that you can currently get on test today. That is until the GR Corolla arrives very shortly with its four-wheel drive system and engine from the GR Yaris. But this ZR is not a holistically sporty hot hatch. It is just sort of a slightly warmed up hatch. It's got the same suspension tune as the rest of the Corolla range, but it's bigger 19-inch alloy wheels give it a little bit of extra crispness in the corners. And I guess the question is the ZR Hybrid a good buy for its $35,000 before on-road costs price? The car I have behind me is in a fairly conservative yet quite attractive silver pearl colorway with a contrasting black roof. They bring the price as tested up a little bit, but I think it's worth it because the Corolla actually still looks really sharp. So even though this car is theoretically due for a facelift sometime in 2023, we expect that facelift to be fairly minor. It's going to be much like what Toyota did to the RAV4 on the outside, where they just add a sharper set of lights, perhaps LED lights up front and round the back, just to update the signatures and the look of the Corolla a little bit. But hopefully they will address one criticism that we're going to come to very shortly, which is the infotainment system of this 12th gen Toyota Corolla, which is starting to feel a little bit dated now in 2022. The graphics just look a little bit immature. But anyway, before we get to that, I'm going to talk you through the design of this car and the practicalities and do all the usual things we do on Chasing Cars. And of course, I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts on the Corolla in the comment section down below. Do you reckon this is still the best small car you can buy, the most efficient and the most frugal one at least? Or do you think there's better options out there? I'd love to hear your opinions. And if you haven't done so already, we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe to our independent car review channel. So what do we think of the Corolla's looks? Well, as I said up the top, it is a handsome design. I still think it continues to be. Perhaps a little bit fussy, but ultimately it's quite a sharp looking small car. The lights are really nicely integrated into the aggressive bumper, and you can tell that this is the ZR variant by its 18-inch alloy wheels with their machine polished faces, which look really crisp. And you can also tell that this is the hybrid variant because you've got a little hybrid badge here, and the Toyota badges have little blue logos on it. But apart from that, I think the Corolla just looks great. But you can let me know your thoughts down below, whether you prefer this or the sedan for the extra practicality and all that sort of stuff. So the cabin of the ZR Hybrid does feel a little bit sporty. That's mainly down to these tombstone style bucket-ish seats with their suede cloth facings and their little leather bolsters, which feel rather nice in quality. The steering wheel as well is quite nicely upholstered in leather, as is the gear selector, and the materials look quite high quality in here. There's a nice graining on all the plastics, and up on the dash it is nice and soft. And then even down here you've got little soft padding, so any sudden braking maneuvers with a passenger in the car are slightly dampened because this is quite a jutting dashboard design. But yeah, it all feels quite nice. Certainly feels a little bit more high quality than that base model Ascent Sport Corolla we jumped in a little while back. And you do get some extra features as well for this ZR. You get the same sized 8-inch touchscreen, but you do get a 7-inch semi-digitized driver's display, which does actually now look quite old in its graphics. The interface is very blue and green heavy, and it kind of looks like old Toyota basically. It's like they've tried to imitate that. You do get seat heating as well, 2-stage heating for these seats. The driver is power adjustable, so I've got, I think it's 8-way adjustment, including lumbar support, so in and out lumbar but not up and down, and tilt for the bottom cushion, which gives me a little bit of extra support because the cushions themselves are a little bit short, not huge amounts of under thigh support, but I am pretty tall with long thighs, so most people are probably going to be quite comfortable. You get a wireless charger here as well, but it's not very well thought out, this wireless charger, because if you go around a corner quickly, your phone tends to slip out onto the floor. Yeah, a little bit annoying, but you know, when you're driving like a sane person, that's actually quite handy. The USB port for your Apple CarPlay mirroring through this 8-inch touchscreen is just here as well, so you can have a nice short cord leading to your phone, or you can have a longer one so you can have it in the cup holders. Although the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto work really quite nicely in this car, the touchscreen is relatively responsive. When you're doing Toyota's own software and its own navigation, it does just feel a little bit old school. The graphics are very sort of washed out. There's not that much contrast in them. I'd love to see the next generation car, or the facelift rather, adopt the same infotainment system we've seen on the Toyota Harrier in Japan and the new Lexus NX, that sort of Android looking digital software that looks a lot crisper than this. So hopefully the facelift that is sort of expected to come in 2023 does solve that. But apart from that, the Corolla actually feels really well built and generally pretty high quality. There's not that much movement in any of the interior materials, and you've got decent storage space as well. Plenty of space for a 700ml bottle in the door and extra odds and ends behind that. And then you've got two cup holders in the center here, which are quite well sized. Again, I can fit my bottle there. Sliding center armrest, little take from the Golf there, nice soft plush padding on top, and a small center bin. You can fit stuff like a wallet or a phone in, another 12-volt socket, and another USB port for charging your devices. And yeah, that's the Corolla. The other thing that this ZR gets is a 10-speaker JBL sound system, which does actually do a pretty convincing job for the class. It's not, you know, amazing and mind-blowing, but it does render the tunes pretty well in here once you've got it set up and tailored to how you like it. So that's the front seat of the Corolla ZR, and at $34,690 plus on-road costs, it kind of feels about that level of quality. Materials are on par with something like a Golf Life. It doesn't really advance the segment, but you know, it's really, really fit for purpose, and I quite like that. The front seat of the Corolla may be very much fit for purpose, but the rear seat is pretty dingy, and this ZR Hybrid doesn't exactly help by having these tombstone seats that are so attractive in the front, and the materials carry on back here. They just obscure a lot of your vision, and the bench is set quite low, so my legs are quite elevated above where the support would be, and my visibility out isn't great. I'd probably get a little car sick on a longer journey, and that's going to be especially true if you're sitting behind the passenger, because that seat doesn't have any sort of height adjust. It's just locked in position, so the headrest is almost basically touching the roof. So going to be less than ideal. Speaking of touching the roof, headroom is actually better than I remember in a Corolla. Not too terrible for me at 6'2", which is a good sign. And then legroom behind my driving position is a little compromised, but ultimately that's not the thing that would make me feel too uncomfortable on a long journey. It's mainly the darkness added with the privacy glass that the ZR gets as well. And then toe room's a little bit tight, but not that terrible. Basically though, if you want more space, you're going to want to step up to an SUV. You can get a RAV4, which is, you know, a whole size class bigger than this for not a whole lot more money than the ZR Hybrid. So perhaps that's the choice, but of course they're all in very low stock at the moment. So, you know, test lots of things before you decide on a Corolla, I would say. Finally, we've got some scratchy plastics here as well, which turn hard in the back where they were soft in the front. But you do have the niceties of this little coffee cup holder here. There are no real door bins, and actually quite a good little handle that could double as a mobile phone storage place. And you get adjustable air vents back here and your own flip down armrest with two more cup holders in the center. It's also nicely leather upholstered, so it doesn't get all yucky, and it's quite easy to clean. Fitting the child seats to the Toyota Corolla is not exactly a pleasant experience. The doors don't open very wide, and it's quite dark back there. The roofline's low and sloping as well, which means it's actually quite difficult to physically get them in there and get the top tether points clipped in, though the ISOFIX ports themselves are actually quite easy to use. And then as you can see, sitting in the front passenger seat ahead of the rear-facing child seat, I am seriously cramped. This is not a great car to pick if you're going to need to carry two kids in the back and two people in the front on a regular basis. Even something like a Hyundai i20N is actually more comfortable and easier to fit baby seats to than this Corolla, despite that car being physically quite a lot smaller. So the packaging of the Corolla then isn't quite absolutely class leading, but if you got to do it, you can do it. At the back of the Corolla hatch ZR Hybrid, you've got this cool little sloping roofline, kind of coupe inspired. I'm sure the Toyota designers and marketing press pack would say. You've also got all these badges to let you know exactly what you have: Corolla, red ZR, and your hybrid badge. A little busy, but you can debadge it yourself. Popping the boot lid, all manually operated for the entire Corolla range. No power tailgates like you'd see on an SUV, but it's not hard to do, and it's not a big reach up, even if you're a little bit shorter than me. And under the boot lid, we find that this is, in fact, the cheat code of Toyota Corollas. If you don't know this already, this is the only Corolla that has a reasonably sized boot. But then you realize that there's no spare tire under the boot floor. So I guess it's a little bit of a balancing act that's down to, I'm not exactly sure why, because all the other hybrids get a space saver spare tire. But anyway, That's what Toyota's chosen to do, but that does mean you can fit a whole heap more of the Chasing Cars Budget Direct soccer balls in there. The count is 39 for the ZR Hybrid versus only 22 for the Ascent Sport Hybrid you guys came along with me to test a couple of months back. So if you're all about practicality, then this car's going to be the winner. You've also got this neat little shopping bag hook up here, but apart from that, the boot isn't particularly smart. There's just a couple of tie-down points, and of course you can flip the seats down pretty easily, but there are no remote tabs to do so. Anyway, let's shut that boot and talk about how much it costs to run a Toyota Corolla. Of course, one of the reasons you'd go for a Toyota Corolla Hybrid are its low running costs, certainly in terms of fuel efficiency. This car is claimed to average 4.2 litres per 100 Ks in the combined ADR cycle, and in real-world testing, we got really close to that number at 4.4 litres per 100 Ks in our round-trip test circuit. But that's climbed to about 4.7 litres per 100 Ks with a little bit more urban driving and a little bit more enthusiastic driving, but still, it's under 5 litres per 100 Ks, and that is seriously fantastic. Now, there are other options out there, like the Volkswagen Golf, which is fairly fuel efficient, though unfortunately it's a little bit hamstrung by the fact that it uses an older generation 1.4 litre turbocharged engine with an 8-speed torque converter automatic rather than the nicer 1.5 litre Evo engine found in the Audi A335 TFSI, which gets rather close to this on paper at 4.7 litres per 100 Ks in the combined cycle. Anyway, let's talk about servicing, because that is really where Toyota is affordable. $205 per service visit, and that's due every 12 months or 15,000 Ks for this brand, and that's going to set you back $1,025 over 5 years of ownership or 75,000 kilometers. Now, the Honda Civic is more affordable to service, but it's a lot more expensive to buy that car outright at over $47,000 drive away, so you're going to save money in the long run going for the Toyota Corolla. Finally, to insurance. The medium budget direct customer over the last 12 months paid $969 to comprehensively insure their new Toyota Corolla. Now, your premium may vary based on things that insurers take into account, such as your driving history, your age, and whether or not you garage the car. The Toyota Corolla ZR, is this sportier to drive out on that road than the Ascent Sport that I tested a little while ago? Well, a little bit, yeah. The larger 18-inch alloy wheels and sportier Dunlop SP Sportmax tyres definitely go a little bit of the way to making this car feel a bit more athletic. There's more grip, and the grip itself is a little bit sharper, so you get a slightly better steering feel. I will say that the Toyota steering is actually really nice, quite sharp off center, but without being overly sporty, and it's not too heavy, and it just feels very natural when you're out on the road, quite calm, especially for a front-wheel drive car. But it's still not a hot hatch. We have to wait for the GR Corolla for that, of course, as you would expect. But the bones of this car make me feel very, very excited indeed for that GR Corolla, because there's just such a great level of poise inherent in this TNGA-based Toyota Corolla, this 12th generation iteration. I've said it before in a previous ZR petrol review and that Ascent Sport we drove, but this car is just really well poised out on the road. It's got a lovely stance, quite a sharp front end, but without being overly aggressive, and still it manages to retain a fair bit of comfort around town. These 18-inch alloys do hurt that a little bit versus those pillowy soft, ultra squishy 16-inch alloys on the base car, but it's really no big deal. They catch maybe 10-15% more sharp-edged hits, but they do give you that more crisp response that is really nice out here on a road like this, where you get to enjoy this car's rather lovely dynamics. Now let's talk about the engine a little bit as well, because as I've discussed before, this car has the 1.8 litre petrol-electric hybrid system. It kicks out 90 kilowatts of power according to Toyota, but the brand doesn't quote a combined torque figure for both the petrol and electric engines. I think it's about 145 newton meters just for the Atkinson cycle 1.8 litre alone, but in reality it feels about 180 to 220 newton meters when you really get into it, and it never has quite the drama of a stepped transmission because this car runs a CVT automatic, though it is a little bit better than it would be just connected to the petrol engine because there's a decent amount of extra electric torque available. Speaking of the basic petrol engine, you can get a 125 kilowatt, 202 newton meter, 2 litre petrol engine. It's actually a really nice little unit, quite sweet and revvy. It suits this car's sporty character quite well if you like taking on some more interesting roads, and it's a little bit more affordable than this hybrid powertrain. But I think this hybrid really does suit the Corolla's appeal, and it's sort of fit for purposeness that we love to talk about here at Chasing Cars. So apart from all the good stuff, the engines, the really rather poised chassis, Toyota's safety suite is actually okay. You get adaptive cruise control in this ZR model as you do in the base car as well. You get forward AEB with pedestrian and cyclist detection, and I don't think the spec sheet says it, but you do get reverse AEB. I had it cut in on me with a bush today, which was not that helpful, but if that bush had been a person, obviously that would be very helpful. And it all works okay. The lane centering and lane keeping assist is still something that is going to be up for improvement. Hopefully Toyota really pays some attention to this, because its systems are just not quite as well tuned as Hyundai's more advanced systems and a lot of other manufacturers out there, including Mazda, which has really upped their game with a nice subtle update to its lane keep assist tuning system. But still, this car's got a 5-star ANCAP rating from its launch back in 2019, and it is overall a pretty safe car out on the road, and a pretty enjoyable one to drive at that. So the Toyota Corolla Hybrid. Do I think this still deserves to be the best-selling car in its segment, even though it might not be because it's being outsold by the Hyundai i30? Well, I think the infotainment system that you find in this Corolla really is starting to look dated. It's funny how 6 months or even 12 months and a higher spec model can really change your opinion as other manufacturers move the game on in terms of interior technology. But the thing is, everything else about the Corolla driving experience is really, really classy. The suspension tuning is comfortable yet sporty enough to give support to a keen driver, and that hybrid powertrain is really well refined now and just fades into background in everyday driving and gives you low fuel consumption figures. Yes, we do wish it had a little bit more power, including the 2-litre that you can get in this car in Europe, but hey, I guess we just got to keep asking for that, and maybe they'll bring that to Australia. Now, you can let me know your thoughts of the Corolla in the comment section down below. Would you wait for the facelift, or are you going to jump on one right now, or would you go for one of its competitors? I'd love to hear your opinions. While you're down there leaving a comment, we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe if you haven't done so already.